is on technology applied to the real world. So I wanted to give you a little taste of some of the technology that's coming down the pike in an industry, the apparel industry, which people see as kind of a sunset industry, an old school industry. Now, I worked in Bangladesh and Vietnam and Indonesia, but the same kind of technologies are happening in Central America, where there is a huge apparel industry, and some of you I know are already in this industry. So let's talk about the role of blockchain and distributed ledger technology. What we're seeing now is a revolution in supply chain traceability, with invoicing and purchase orders all being able to be put onto the blockchain, which would allow traceability from the very early stages of the agricultural supply chain. And there are terrible issues with, for example, child labor in the cotton industry in Uzbekistan. There's terrible pollution in the rivers in China, in the textile industry. And most of these problems end up in the supply chains of Western brands who really want to do something different. They really want to be sustainable, but it's very hard to track. Now, what blockchain and distributed ledger technology will be able to do in the apparel industry is to create a trusted, distributed net of information and structure around sustainable attributes of elements in the supply chain. Now, it will also allow, with Internet of Things in factories, the real-time monitoring of factories and cloud-based monitoring. So one of the biggest problems when I was speaking with the head of sustainability for Gap is they said unauthorized subcontracting in the apparel industry is a real problem, where the factories take an order from a big brand and then put it out to a third-party contractor out the back door, and that's where you get the child labor and the really poor conditions. Now, the solution, or one of the solutions, is the transparency associated with real-time monitoring through Internet of Things. Water pollution is a huge problem. What we're seeing is IoT devices being put in the effluent treatment plants of textile mills and monitoring for salinity and turbidity and pH and other pollutants. And they can be tamper-proof so that if they are moved, it's obvious, and then all of this data can be mined for anomalies. So instead of having an auditing culture where you have to go and check, it becomes an investigation exercise where you only have to check the anomalies, because there's so much data coming up and the algorithms are identifying what is normal data. And then as soon as you get some unusual data, you say, oh, that's probably worth looking into. So we can deal with things like illegal overtime, where the data around the sewing machines is being captured now. There are garment manufacturers in Sri Lanka that have fully implemented machine operator systems so that every sewing machine is actually monitored, and that can all be tracked against overtime and payrolls and so on. So you're creating an entire ecosystem of data integrity. So let's think about the workers' welfare. Well, now you have apps where the workers in China, for example, have apps which are attached to the payroll, where the workers get their hours and payroll, and this will avoid all the disputes about did you work too long and so on. Now, we might take these kind of apps for granted in developed countries, but in developing countries, this type of transparency in the workplace is incredibly empowering. And then you have third-party grievance mechanisms, so that if workers are underpaid, they are one click away from an independent person to complain to, and that can go back to the brands who are the buyers. Then you have fintech, and fintech is really revolutionizing the base of the pyramid. You're now having fintech companies which are learning through machine learning how to identify people who are good credit risks. There's one company I was speaking to in the Philippines, and they suck up all the data of the phone. When you download the app, they just pull up everything they can, and then they assess whether you're a good credit risk based on historical machine learning algorithms. And what they find is some interesting things. For example, if you capitalize in your texts and emails and chats, you're a better credit risk. So I think you should tell your kids that when they send you texts with all lowercase. And then there's banking and access to finance. Similar to loans, there's also banking products and savings products where people can actually get access to global savings products and diversify their savings. There's insurance products being built into mobile phones now. So all of this is happening for the poorest workers on the planet, and that is incredibly powerful. But let's jump to the customer. What we're seeing with IoT is apps which can scan your body. And one company that was bought by Google just needs a phone, and you can stand there in your underwear and your friend can walk around, and you've got a 3D exact scan of your body shape, which you can then upload. And then you get exact measurements so that the clothes don't have to be produced first guessing how many people of each size want that garment. Clothes can actually be produced in real time based on exactly who has ordered what online and then distributed accordingly. We're also seeing a whole lot of development in medicine. So the clinic that the garment worker goes to, traditionally they've been staffed by fairly poorly trained nurses or medical assistants. But now with telemedicine, we have companies that are building small devices which can be applied en masse to thousands of people to take vitals and other testing, and all of that data can go back to central repositories that can analyze that data and then provide much, much higher levels of care and quality to the poorest workers on the planet. So you might think in the garment industry, wow, this is an incredible development. And it is. It's very powerful, and there are a lot of really great things happening. But they've just invented a sewing robot. So what's going to happen? And interestingly, this was developed by people in the United States because the United States policy is to make its own military uniforms. And because it's so expensive to make apparel in the United States, there was a very strong incentive to develop a sewing robot. Now, it's taken 200 years to develop a sewing robot. We got the spinning bit and the weaving bit right in the Industrial Revolution. But fabric is particularly floppy, and it's just difficult for robots to make. But it looks like they've finally cracked that, and we will have sewing robots within 5 or 10 years. They're already starting to operate in pilot factories. So I guess while there's some incredible technology really coming and being applied to the real world, both in terms of blockchain, in terms of traceability, so that we know where our garments are coming from, in terms of AI and machine learning to really understand the needs and integrate it into fintech. We still have that question of the jobs of the future. And when we automate the apparel industry, my question for the other speakers is, will we be able to generate enough jobs in other industries? Will we be able to educate people fast enough to be able to adapt to the changes of rapidly automating away an industry like sewing, which we've kind of taken for granted? The apparel industry has been the one industry that has pulled almost every country out of poverty. Some people think of the apparel industry as, you know, it's sweatshops and people getting treated badly and so on. But if we think in the big picture, It is the industry which has allowed people to transition from agriculture into industrial and then developed economies. And whenever you have a garment factory, you learn management skills, and you learn how to do budgets, and you learn how to employ and manage hundreds and thousands of people. And all of those skills then get built to the next stage of developing cars and computers and more advanced economies. So my question is there going to be a sufficient ability for economies to adapt and workforces to adapt? Is the rate of job displacement going to exceed the rate of job creation? And I think that's an open question. There are optimists and there are pessimists, and I would love the speakers and others to really engage on that question. So turning to our next two speakers, design is an absolutely vital part of this solution. And if we are to solve the world's problems, the products and services that we have not only have to work for sustainability and for ethics and human welfare, they have to perform. Not only do they have to perform, they have to outperform. And I think this is the case when it comes to Tesla, or when it comes to sustainable architecture, or if it comes to impact investing. If we are to solve the problems we want to solve in the world, the products can't be the equivalent of the hemp shirt from the 80s. The products have to be the best products in their class, and they are solving the world's problems. So I'd like to introduce Javier Verdura, who is the Director of Product Design for Tesla Motors. Javier has an incredible pedigree in design and has been a key part of the design of the Model X and the Model 3, and in particular the supercharger, which is Tesla's charging station, which is now across the whole of the United States. So Javier, thank you.